the brand new college football season, and along with it, the Tom Herman era, beginning right now at the University of Texas.
Tom, in 1999 and 2000, you were a graduate assistant at the University of Texas. What would have been your response if I would have said 17 years later, you were going to be the head coach at this university?
I'd have said that's a dream come true. When you're a GA, you just want to go be a full-time coach and actually get paid a little bit of money and go recruit and coach your own position. And when someone says dream job, I mean, I got my master's degree here. I'm a Division III football guy myself, and to be thrust into the mecca of college football as your first Division I football experience, it was something that was intoxicating, and I always wanted to come back and wear the burnt orange and white.
Looking back at last season, was the rebuilding task maybe more difficult than you first envisioned when you got to Austin?
I don't think so. I knew, 3 straight losing seasons is something that's a very difficult thing to overcome. Our guys learned from that experience. I think we grew tremendously. I think there's no doubt in my mind that if you watched us play, you saw a team that was playing harder, more physical, more cohesive than Texas had played in a long time. But it does take time. There's a reason that we were brought in, and that was not to have one season, not to have a couple big wins, but to build a championship sustainable program.
Since your days as an offensive coordinator at Ohio State and continuing at Houston and at Texas, your teams have been an underdog in 16 games. You know how many of those games you've won?
No.
12, which is amazing. 3 of the losses were by 5 points or less. Why have your teams thrived so much in that underdog situation?
I think whenever you can play more physical, when you can play harder and you can play with a greater purpose than your opponent, which for us is the genuine love of the guy next to you and your coaches, then you can overcome a lot of talent discrepancies. You can overcome maybe some strategic deficiencies. We live by the adage that culture eats strategy for lunch, and we believe that our culture is second to none. And even when you are faced with significant talent discrepancies, that you can at least stay in every ball game by playing harder and more physical than the team across from you.
The first year you finished with 6 regular season wins, the same as Charlie's first year in Texas. Some fans may say 6 wins, both coaches the first year, it's the same. But how is it different in your mind?
Well, one, in talking to opposing coaches, any coaches that have watched us play, people that I respect that know the game of football, probably the biggest compliment that I received throughout the season was, man, Texas is playing hard. You got those guys playing really, really hard and really physical.
Warren's going to be stopped at the 2-yard line. Now he's pushing forward to the 1. He's in. Touchdown. Texas wins. Chris Warren kept the feet moving.
Year 1 was about establishing a culture, not necessarily worried about wins and losses, but we also understand the trajectory for our program because of how hard and how physical we've been playing and training, that the wins will come.
The talent level in the Big 12 is so close. Is it simply the difference being having a difference maker at quarterback, and do you believe you will have one this year?
You don't need one to have a really good season or a great season, but I do think you've got to have a special one to have a championship season.
Last year, your leading rusher for the season was a quarterback. Can you guys be successful long term if your quarterback is leading the team in rushing?
No.
You would prefer maybe a running back to take that mantle?
I would definitely prefer that, yes. Now, we've got to find one that, our running backs are historically, I think, over the last couple of years, we're only averaging about 2.8 yards per carry from the running back position. So we've got to get better at that position. But a running back is only as good as his offensive line, too. And that was an area that was decimated with injuries last year. And I think we had something like 8 or 9 different starting lineups. We had guys, starting in games that had never even played in games before for us. And so hopefully the offensive line continues to get better. They had a great spring. We're still a little thin from a depth standpoint, but feel good about the the 5 starters and their development. Feel good about the hiring of Herb Hand, one of the best offensive line coaches in the last 10 years in college football, and you know, feel good about where we're headed. But you can't survive having your quarterback lead you in rushing, and B, have that number only be 380 yards.
Yeah, I was going to say under 400.
Yeah.
You're going into year 2. There are a number of coaches, Bob Stoops, Nick Saban, Urban Meyer, Kirby Smart, that have gone from 7 or 8 win seasons in year 1 to being a national title contender in year 2. So no pressure here, but what can Texas do to be able to make a similar jump in year 2 under Tom Herman?
We've got to continue to develop as players. You know, we started, I think there were a lot of games where we started 4 or 5 true freshmen on offense, which is certainly not a recipe for, you know, lighting the scoreboard up. But the best thing about true freshmen is they become sophomores, and they've got a year under their belt. They've got great experience. They get a year in our strength program. They get a year to develop. So I think that we've got to learn how to finish those close ball games. We've got to turn those close losses into wins. And then we've got to not worry about, you know, the overall record. We've got to continue with our #1 pillar of our program, which is to go 1-0 in everything that we do, which is to compete and win in everything, whether it's a drill, a rep, a practice, a class, a relationship, is to compete and do our very best in everything that we do, and we feel like the wins at that point will take care of themselves.